to the Relationship Revivalist podcast. I am Jon, and I'm here with my amazing co-host and wife, Jess.
Hey, Jon.
Hey.
So today we're going to talk about a subject that I don't think is often talked about, really, with relationship coaches and coaching.
Well, I mean, we've gone through and talked about a lot of those topics. Which one are you talking about?
So today we're going to talk about forgiveness and how important it is and how to forgive in your marriage. It's so important.
Your marriage, or even a relationship, a dating relationship, or within your family. This is something that's huge for any type of a relationship, I think.
Absolutely. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, there are times where you'll go through life and you're having a great time, and then one of you does something probably unknowingly, to the other one, and then there's a chance to forgive. And we're going to talk about why that's important, how to do it, and how that helps keep you really, really close together in your relationship.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit of this forgiveness stuff that we are on talking about. So when we forgive, I think there's a misconception about why we need to forgive and when we need to forgive. And I think this is where we stumble up on getting into worse of a relationship, and people are getting mad at you, or they just don't even want to deal with you because if you've done something to them or they've done something to you and you don't forgive them, maybe they're thinking they could just walk all over you. Maybe they think that, well, they're not going to forgive me, so I'm just going to continue doing whatever I'm doing, and I don't even know what I'm doing. Perhaps, there should be some communication. We talked about that in a couple of podcasts before about the communication.
And that's no way to live life, just thinking, well, why try to please them because I'm never going to please them anyway. And that's terrible,
Yeah. Yeah. So when we are forgiving people, we have to realize it's not for us. It's not for them, I should say. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. It's more for you, because if you don't forgive, it can build up a big, huge wall inside of you. We don't want those walls to be in any kind of a relationship, because that is where separation happens. That is where if you're building those walls, you can guarantee that you're not going to have a relationship with that person anymore. And if it is a relationship, it's going to be one nasty relationship. It's going to be biting each other's heads off. It just keeps going downhill from there.
And when you have a wall up in between the two of you, how can you really be equally yoked? And how can you really be a united front like we've talked about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are a couple other podcasts. Yeah. If I'm correct, the United Front is like our second podcast.
I think you're right. Or maybe third.
Yeah. Episode 2 and 3 are probably huge right there. Mm-hmm. But so, Jess, you asked me a question earlier this evening that we, as we're recording our podcast. Can you just kind of speak that out and let us know what that question is?
Yeah. So I was referring to oftentimes it's women, not all the time, but a lot of times when women get in an argument with their spouses, they are able to remember everything their spouse has ever done for the last 50 years, everything that they didn't like that the spouse had done, and they can pull out charts and graphs and make their case to win their argument. And women especially, I think, do that very, very well. And so I was asking Jon, is there a shelf life to something? If you've already forgiven it, is it fair to bring it up again?
So very pointed and very good questions. I would say on the guy's side, the shelf life question, I would say yes, definitely there is a shelf life, unless... Now, guys, you have to listen to this, and this is just purely my opinion, but I'd say there is a shelf life, but if you continue to do the same things that maybe your partner, your spouse, your wife has asked you to do, and it's fair, and you continue to do things she's asked you not to do, I would say that gives her the right to remind you. Now, I'm also saying that it really does matter how she takes that reminding, what kind of tone comes back, and how she does it, because that there can be a touchy subject.
Those are really good points, Jon, and something that men and women need to know about.
And so you were asking me also, when do we forgive?
Yeah.
And so we could just bring out the Bible on this one, and it says, "Don't let the sun go down on any kind of..."
And your anger, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that really means and implies that as soon as you can, you deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about it. Talk about what it was that you didn't like and what you'd rather have the person do. But make sure that it's out of love. And like Jon said, make sure your tone is correct. Make sure your heart attitude is correct. That's so important that it's coming out of a heart of love, not just, anger and like, I'm going to get back at them and I'm going to let them know how awful they were. We don't want to do that.
No, not at all. And, there are people that love to hold grudges. And, I think there's a deeper rooted issue when people hold grudges.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit here and try to nail down why people have grudges. But, if you're one that holds grudges, you know why you do it. If you don't, I would highly suggest figuring that one out. There may be some forgiveness issues there.
Yeah, absolutely. Forgiveness issues. Probably a lot of times if you're quick to hold a grudge and hold it for a long time, there are probably some really deep-seated issues, maybe some deep hurts from the past, and it all could be resulting in fear. We were talking with one of our friends the other day, and she really made a really good point about there's fear and there's love. They're opposites. You can't have fear and love, and you can't have love and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that if you're really coming against your partner, like, how come you always do this way, and I don't like it when and you are not checking your own heart attitude, it might be coming out of fear instead of love.
Mm-hmm. So if you're doing something that is coming from fear, stop that, number one. And two, realize that you're really not growing that relationship. Mm-hmm. You're actually holding on to that fear. And we know that fear never really is actually going to happen.
Mm-hmm. True. And the Bible even says, Jon, that perfect love casts out all fear.
Yeah. So then that tells us we need to cast the fear out.
And the word perfect there is really mature. So if you're afraid and in fear and holding these grudges against your spouse, haven't really let your love grow and mature for your spouse.
Yeah.
So we want to grow and be mature in our love, right?
Yeah. So when do we have a right to bring these things up?
That's a good point. So, I think from a woman's standpoint, and hopefully this helps men too, I think there are times where it's important to let your wishes be known. Mm-hmm. But like Jon said, in the right tone, right heart attitude. You don't want to feel like a doormat and like you're never heard. So it's important to bring up an issue if there's something that you don't like that's happened or keeps happening. But is it okay? So let's say they change, you've forgiven them. Is it okay to bring it up in another argument if they're not doing those things anymore that you didn't like in the first place? That's not fair.
No, and I've talked in the last podcast about some of the relationships that I've had. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I seem to be stumbling on my words. But through my experience, I have experienced the woman taking things and throwing them right back in my face. I don't know that they knew that was what they were doing, that was actually going to hurt me more. Maybe that was their intent, was to hurt me as much as they could. Typically, I would say that happens to younger's relationships. But when we get older, we get more wiser.
Hopefully, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, it should be.
So if you're taking these things and you're trying to hurt your man, or you're trying to make a point, I've seen them take these things out of not out of context, but more in an unfair method. So they know the rules, the things that we've just kind of discussed right now, and they just throw all of them out the window and say, this is all no holds barred.
It's like really below the belt.
It really is. And it's like they say they want the relationship, but it's like they're speaking out of both sides of their mouths. And you really can't have a good relationship with that, like that. And so we want to encourage you to be more cognizant about how you say things, what you say, and how your actions are towards your partner.
Yeah, and that makes me think of when the Bible talks about a married couple becoming one flesh. You would never put yourself down where you shouldn't anyway. So you should absolutely never put your spouse down, right? And so tearing down never works. We don't want to do that. We always want to build up, and that was another podcast too, building up your spouse.
So it seems like we're kind of just wrapping things up. But, forgiveness is one of those topics that is so huge, and yet so little of it happens. It's more of if you look in the media and you look in, you could look on all the social medias, but like news networks, they're always going at the jugular. They're never saying anything about forgiveness. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, when you're talking about news media, I think a lot of times they want a sensational story for one. But also if you really listen carefully, you'll notice and feel probably a lot of fear coming from them. And so they're not really, the stories aren't really coming from a place of love a lot of the time. Also, so sometimes there are times where, somebody might do something to you, and especially someone really close to you, like your husband or wife, and it really hurts. And usually the closer the person is, the more they can hurt you, right? Or more you can hurt them.
Yeah, because you're more vulnerable to them.
Right, because you really let them in. You're really, really close. And so how do we forgive when it hurts really, really bad?
Well, you have to do that not by yourself, but you have to involve God.
Absolutely.
You really do. You have to talk to the Holy Spirit and say, hey, I'm hurting. And this is where you learn how to cast that onto his shoulders. It says in the Bible, we cast all of our cares onto his shoulder. He wants that.
That's right.
I've heard many times where if you take this care or you take this burden or whatever it is, and you picture yourself putting it on a line for a fishing pole. And then you take it and you throw it so far and so hard like you've never done before. And you say, Jesus, take this.
Yep.
That's the act. That's what it actually means. If you go into the Greek, that's what it actually means, is to cast it onto him so far and so as hard and fast and whatever adjective you can say about doing that action. So that's
throwing it on his shoulders.
Exactly.
And I've done that before, and not necessarily if I've had to forgive you, Jon, but a lot of times our minds even are playing against us too, and they're trying to build up this wrong big in our minds, and so a lot of times I'll just say, Lord, I just give that to you. Help me forgive that person. Help me have your love for them.
Yes.
Help me to see them through your eyes, and he will do that. He will show you their hearts, how they really are, how the core of their person really is, not, so you can look past what one action was, and he really helps us forgive. And so make sure that you're giving it to the Lord, because then he can actually do something and work it out for you. So that kind of wraps up our time today. Again, we're talking about forgiveness, how important it is, especially between spouses, that we never have anything in between us. The only person who should be in between us is God himself, because he's the glue that holds us together. But we should never have a wall of unforgiveness between us. We want that space comfy and cozy for each other.
Yep. So like Jess said, this is the end of the podcast. We'd love if you would just share this podcast out with other people. If you are on iPhone, I know there's a little up square arrow. Go ahead and share it and message it to people, or on your favorite social media
and this
network.
Was podcast number 7.
Yeah, we're getting close to number 10.
Woo!
Double digits.
Wow.
All right. So we would love to see you on the next podcast next Wednesday. We do post our podcast every Wednesday. And if you have a favorite time that you like to get these things, go ahead and message us. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram, and we do check messages. So we look forward to seeing you, and have a wonderful Christmas, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you next time.